The Paul Leslie Interviews.
Ladies and gentlemen, sitting down with a composer, a songwriter, a drummer, a performer, Mr. Roger Guth. Thank you so much for making the time to do this.
Thanks for having me.
It's an honor. So, I think most stories are best from the beginning. You come from the great state of Missouri?
Right.
What's the name of the town you're from?
St. Louis.
From St. Louis. Well, tell us about your parents.
Well, they were farmers. My whole family was. And I grew up, they had a little band, and I played with them.
What kind of music did they play?
It was like, kind of German folk music. Not folk music, but, they would play weddings and dances and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. My sister played. My dad played accordion. That's how I got interested in playing, just out of jealousy.
What do you mean by that jealousy?
Well, they all played and I didn't play anything, so I was like, I better play something.
Interesting.
Well, at least that's the way I remember it. I don't know if that's what it actually was.
So would you describe it as a musical family?
Yeah, very much. Not that they weren't professional musicians, but there was always, music around all them. I mean, I know if I had grown up if they wouldn't have been playing music, I probably wouldn't have picked that up, or at least been encouraged to. I mean, they didn't like the idea of me being a professional musician. But,
why not?
Well, it's a risky business.
Always, yeah.
And pretty much the failure rate is, 90 out of 100. So, but when I became more successful later, then we're okay with it.
Well, why do some people make it and some people don't?
I don't know. Luck.
Yeah.
It's pure luck. I mean, you can go into a whole thing about somebody works harder than others, but there's a luck element to it.
Yeah. What about the music that you liked the most? What were your favorites?
What do you mean?
Like, just growing up, the music that you particularly gravitated towards.
Well, I started out, I was listening to lots of big band stuff. That's when I first listened to. Because, I was a drummer and I wanted to be like Buddy Rich or something, So that kind of stuff. And then gradually once I got deeper into that, then it was more like I got into the more like Miles and Coltrane, and Tony Williams became one of my favorites, and Roy Haynes and all those guys, the more jazz drummers. So
it's more melody that excites you than a lyric. Or would you say that that's not correct?
No, I like pop music and lyrics too, Like I love the Beatles and Elton John and Stevie Wonder and Paul Simon. Those were all, I listen to all that stuff too. I would have to say I listen to the other stuff more but until I became more interested in songwriting, and, then that sort of, it became like a dual thing.
I mean, if you just look at the music that you've written, it's so varied. There's everything from this jazz album, the new album, right. Tin Roof, to, songs that almost have like a folksy kind of character to it.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, it's fun to be able to do all that, Maybe I should have stuck with one thing more.
What is it about the genre of jazz that is exciting to you?
It's just musically interesting to me, I like harmony a lot. I like melody. I like musicians being able to play, kind of complexity. And it's not complexity. It's just, listening to someone really. I mean, that kind of music doesn't have boundaries per se so much as like, for instance, like if it's a bluegrass music, you can't once you get sort of out of the language of that idiom, it doesn't sound like bluegrass anymore. It sounds like jazz meets bluegrass. So, you know what I mean? You can't, those idioms sort of are really limiting. Like you can't use those kind of chords and that, whereas I don't even like calling it jazz, but I mean, that kind of music sort of lets everything be. I mean, it can sound limiting too, but if it, on its best day, it doesn't because it can let anything in, like if someone wants to have an African influence or, a classical influence or whatever, it just is. It doesn't have to fit into some format, or whatever. Yeah. Which is not necessarily bad or good. It's just what it is.
So on this Tin Roof, when I was listening to it, the first thing I thought, and I hope you take this as a compliment, I thought, this is a lot like the music that Pat Metheny composes.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's a big influence on me. Yeah, very large.
Yeah.
So it would,
which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, Peter Mayer is here as well, and we'll be asking him a few questions.
So this was my interview.
Well,
Roger made me dream of duct tape.
were the drums your first instrument?
Yeah.
And you chose the drums?
Yeah.
Why? What was it about it?
I don't know. It's probably easier to play. I thought it would be easy to play, but I was wrong.
And when did you start on the piano?
Not that well. I don't really play piano, but
Yeah.
I mean, I tinkle around on it. But I mean, we had one and my sister played, so I just started playing. Probably should have played piano.
Well, why is that?
Well, it feels very natural to me. Like I've never really taken any lessons or anything, and if I really studied it, I'd probably be a pretty good piano player. I mean, it sounds arrogant to say that, but I don't mean it that way.
Do you compose on the piano?
Yeah.
Yeah. When did you find out you could write songs?
I don't know. I don't know that I can.
Come on.
All you do is do what you do, and and hope somebody, or if you like it, that I never thought about. I mean, I don't know. That's kind of a hard question.
Are you trying to get any type of reaction? I don't remember if this was on a review that I read. This might have been a review that I read on one of the other albums, the earlier albums, or because I've asked a lot of people about you and your music. This might have been Chris Walters who said the songs are always thought-provoking. What are you looking for? Is it that?
What do you mean? I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, I mean, you just take a song like, for example, Cowboy Ballet.
Right.
Okay. You listen to it, and you have to have an opinion about what it's saying.
Oh yeah. Well, those are fun to me because you get to be sort of like a writer, And I'm a big fan of Randy Newman and some other people I can't think of, but that have that kind of ironic, dark humor. It's more fun than just writing a chorus. I mean, It's more interesting.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that song in particular. It's kind of humorous, but it kind of has like a sad element to it. It feels sad. What is it to you?
It's probably that.
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, life is kind of, bittersweet, funny.
Yeah, if you're paying attention.
Ideally, as an artist, you have an artistic vision somewhere that comes out, and it usually is based on one kind of personality trait or something, yours, or that's what I think, So you're constantly kind of in the back. There's always that thing that you do, however you see the world or whatever it is. It comes through in your painting or whatever you're doing. I think. And if you don't have an opinion or a thing, then your art is kind of like, well, why should I listen to you? You don't have to agree with it or disagree with it, but you should have something to say, I would think.
What kind of things inspire your songwriting?
Well, other musicians and songs and other music, reading, stuff, other writers, That's pretty much most of it. The sound of it is really a lot of it, or the feel, I don't sit and look at a sunset and go, I'm going to write a song like that. That's kind of Pollyannish to me. It's a little more about the relationship between you and the notes or something. I don't, that sounds esoteric, but it's hard to put into words, but,
With us here is Peter Mayer, and I was hoping you could tell us about the very first time you two met. What was your initial impression?
Well, I don't really remember, but I was actually friends with his brother, Jim, first. And we were playing together, and then I don't remember the day or something that I met Pete, but, Jim said my brother plays guitar or whatever, and Pete was already kind of famous around town as like the good guitar player. But I don't remember walking into a room and going, oh, hey, Pete,
When you first played together, or work together in any kind of way, did you know immediately that there was a creative musical chemistry there?
Yeah, I don't know if it was immediate, but it developed pretty fast. This is something cool, I don't know if it was immediate, but it was pretty quick. This really works really well and very, you just kind of feel the same things, and you don't have to work like you get right to the work, like you're not like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You're just putting it, it's like we get right to work. We don't ballyhoo around the edges so much, And it's not that everybody's different, because I've written with some other writers, but you just don't have that same connection on that level,
What about you, Peter?
There's always been a chemistry there. And I remember the first time we played, back then, Roger and Jim seemed more into jazz than I had been. I always think that they've been better jazz players in that sense, but they we taught each other back then. But I think we fit together like really good puzzle pieces. Like Roger and Jim were aggressive in ways that I wasn't, and vice versa. And with Tin Roof, and it's been this way with Raj throughout our history, that it's almost like there's always a third party in the room. Not necessarily Jim, but when Roger and I get together, it just starts happening. And I think, right, Raj? I mean,
it's almost magical. I'd never say this stuff, but with Pete, it is like I'll bring something in, and Pete will be like the finishing, and be like, "That's exactly what it needs," and I never thought of that, but I knew you would.
And I think
or we'll come up. We're just in the same room. It won't even be one or the other. It'll just be like, well, what if? Yeah, that's it. And then let stuff just kind of flow, which is the way it's supposed to be.
We were fans of similar chords and stuff like that, and we have to, at least I have to thank Jay Oliver, who early Buffett member and also a wonderful musician in his own right for some of that. But Raj always had a net. He talked about his keyboard thing. I just, as you guys were talking about that, I wanted to add this in, that he says he's not a piano player, but you lay your hands on the piano rod and he feels it. It's almost like someone's playing through him. He finds chords that he wants. And the thing that proves that to me is that Chris Walters, or other fine piano players, will have to figure out some of the voicings because they're not typical piano, as if there's typical piano voicings, but because there are secret notes in there which are things we love, and Raj just kind of lays his hands there and says, I like that. No, I don't like that. I like this. And that's what's, one last thing I'll say about the writing on Tin Roof. He brought in a lot of these songs already mostly assembled, or like melodies were already together, chords were much together. But what the way we work together is that we put down the recordings, and then Raj would say, I want a passage here that goes like this, and goes up, and then we'd find a passage. So I wanted to say that, though, because I co-wrote some of these with Raj, but he brought in the vision.
Well, there's one of the songs on there I wanted to ask you about it in particular. Is there any significance to the title? It's a very soothing song, and I'm talking about Still Life.
Well, I don't know if there's a significance. It's just kind of a nice title. But it's a very old song, actually, of mine. It's like way old.
Is that Back to Left Lane?
Yeah. I mean, I like 1985 or whatever that is. Yeah. And I've never gotten the chance to record it. And it's always stuck with me. Like, man, someday, you come back to it every, few years. You're like, it's a really good song. I should record this one day. And I never really had the opportunity because it's such a, it's like a little jazz ballad. But on this, I was like, this would be a good place for this, because it would fit in here. So it worked out really well, and everybody played it really well. And so,
not just the songs on the Tin Roof album, just in general. When you two write together, what is that process like? What does it look like from someone who's just eavesdropping?
Probably really boring.
Yeah, some of it is. But I'll say about the quickness of it, you can take any title, because this probably happened both ways, Raj, where I'll have an idea. Well, like Color of the Sun on Jimmy's last album was one of them. We wrote that together. And I have to say that was mostly Raj and me putting together that melody and the lyrics, and then it was finished by all of us, which made a good song, I think. But there's nothing there's nothing that feels like we can't write it. It's like if you said Stinky Dog is your title, I think we could probably come up with something that's pretty good for Stinky Dog, because it's just so easy. And I think that's not because we're the same. It's because we somehow complement.
How did you know that it was time to come out with this album? What gave you the feeling? What got it?
Oh, I thought Jimmy might quit, so I would run out of money, and this would be it. This would be a good time to put out this record, because it costs me money to make. Yeah, besides that, it was just, there was a little window of months, and I had written these tunes. It was really like the songs. I came up with one song, and then I was like, I showed it to Pete, and he was like, wow, that's pretty neat, and then I was like kind of encouraged, like, maybe I'll write some more of these. And they just sort of happened. I mean, I don't want to sound like it's magical. I did them, and so I had enough songs, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this, so it's something I always wanted to do, and, so, and then there was a window of opportunity when we were on the road with Jimmy and everybody was kind of free to record for a little while, so.
I wanted to go and ask about some of the songs you've written from the past. Moonlight over Paris. What did you think of the interpretation that Vanessa Williams did?
Oh, I thought it was good. It was fun. I mean, it's different than, the version Pete sang, but it was, I thought it was a great treat to have a song that I feel really good about. Like, I think that's one of the best songs I've ever been involved in. I really liked it, and then to have someone like her do it, it was really exciting. I wish it would have been a big hit or something, but,
What inspired that song, Moonlight over Paris?
Well, there is actually I was taking Kelly, my wife, well, we weren't even married then. We were living in New York, and I took her to the airport. I get sued for this, but I took her to the airport to go visit some family or something in Newark, New Jersey, and, and those were the days when you went in with somebody. So I walked in
to the airport?
Yeah, so I went into the airport, and she went on the flight, and I went in the bookstore and bought this book, Still Life with Woodpecker, which is by Tom Robbins. I think that's the title of it. Anyway, in the book, I kind of pieced together a phrase that he used, and that was and then I really liked that, and I don't know, it was another one of those things where and I lived in New York, and I wrote this melody, and then Pete and I got together a few months later, and I showed it to those guys, and Jim, and they really liked it, and then we kind of finished it together, and actually Pete really mapped out a lot of the lyric idea because it was one of those like, I know this is cool, but I can't get any further than this, But it did come from that.
Who do you think did the best interpretation of a song that you wrote?
What do you mean?
Just any song you wrote, a particular recording artist, do you think this person did the best treatment of something I wrote? Whether you wrote it by yourself or you wrote it with a co-writer?
Well, I don't know. Well, I haven't had that many covers or anything, so I don't really know.
I guess it would be Jimmy, you, me, and Vanessa Williams.
Yeah, I mean, as far as a cover, probably Vanessa or something
and then
like
Dave
that.
Weckl as well has covered.
Yeah.
The songs we've written.
Yeah. I mean, they were all good,
There wasn't a particular one that you listened back to and you thought, this was the best recording of something I wrote. Couldn't say?
I couldn't say.
What got you to start the recording career of your own? What got you to start singing? Like the first album, Scotch?
I don't know. That was probably a mistake, right?
Didn't Elliot Shiner have something to do with kind of encouraging you?
Yeah, he actually did. Yeah, that's funny. He did. He really liked my voice for some reason. Because that's right. When I first wrote for Jimmy, I really didn't play with him, and Elliot had said, why don't you guys write some tunes for this album, And so Jay Oliver and I wrote some, and we needed somebody to sing the demo, and I was like, well, Jay's like, why don't you sing it, And I was like, okay. And they were kind of simple songs, and, it's always an advantage when I sing, because then the singer singing going, well, I can do better than that.
There was one song I think that you wrote with Jay Oliver from that era that Jimmy picked up and covered, and that was I think you wrote it with Jay Oliver, Mermaid in the Night.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the kind of inspiration?
That was a good version of that. Speaking of,
yeah.
I mean, I thought Jimmy did it right, and it, it fit him really well, and he liked it. It seemed to really work. Anyway, what was your question?
I was just going to ask you, just kind of like, what was the initial spark that got that song going?
I don't even know if if I can remember. I don't know. I was really into writing lyrics then, or trying to anyway. And, when you become this is going to sound like I'm saying I'm a good writer, but when you become a competent writer enough, you could give me an assignment and I could go home and come up with something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it might not be any good, but you're going to be able to do that. If you do that enough, you sort of get this palette to, work with, and any good writer does that. And, you write 10 songs and one of them's okay, and sometimes they just happen, and you go, wow, how did that happen? But it usually is, my theory anyway, this is a theory, that's all, you don't know, nobody knows. My theory is that you write all these songs and then every night there's one back there that's really good, but you've got to do this other shit to get it out.
What about Ruby's Restless Heart Lounge? What was the inspiration behind that song?
Man, I don't even remember that one. Is that the one about a whorehouse?
Right.
Or bordello?
I wondered when I heard it.
That's what it is.
Very politic, Paul. I wondered.
I mean, that's one of those dark little, like a film noir thing, or something like that.
Is there a song of yours that is your favorite? It's usually impossible for songwriters to pick.
Yeah, I really like that one's on the new album a lot.
Yeah. And which one would that be from this one? Could you?
Well, I think they're all really good, but if I had to pick a favorite, I would probably go with Tin Roof.
Okay. And what about you, Peter? Which one do you think is the strongest composition?
Wow. That's a tough one. I don't know. I think it would either be New July or... But all of them, they're really like symphonic pieces in that they're so multi-splendid. It's so different than writing a pop song. They're really involved pieces. So I really enjoyed the process. But probably one of those two.
When you have a song with a character in it, is the character real to you? Do you see it in your mind, or what's it like when you are, if we're looking into your head when you're writing? Because a lot of the songs that you've written have a character, it seems, from Cowboy Ballet, Frenchmen for the Night.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You don't really see somebody. It's just kind of. It seems like a kind of cool idea. It's like a story. Yeah, I don't know if I could describe the process much more than that.
Well, on the note of Frenchmen for the Night, it's very different from a lot of Jimmy Buffett's songs. It's very distinct.
Right.
Can you tell us about writing that song?
Yeah, that's another one of those ones where I don't know where that came from, but I mean, it's kind of funny because Jimmy was going to do a new album. I distinctly remember I had this little piano idea and I had the lyric idea, and we were rehearsing on stage somewhere one night, or at a sound check, right? And I walked up. I said, "Hey, Jimmy, come here and listen to this." And I said, "What do you think of this?" And I just played him the little thing. I didn't have any of the, it was kind of half done. And he was like, "Oh, that's awesome," or whatever he said. He liked it a lot. So then we finished it, together, and then that's how it happened. But I never even made it. Well, no, I did make a demo, didn't I?
Yeah, I think you did.
Oh. But it was kind of weird, because usually you don't go up to somebody and go, "Well, what do you," and you kind of play them this half idea. I mean, I would do that with Pete, because he knows what I want, or he's going to have his imagination in place. But with someone you don't, you want to, it's like, I don't know what I'm saying, but you don't just start to go, "Hey," they're not going to get it. Mm-hmm. But unless you write with someone, then they go, "Oh, I see what you're doing," then they can go, "Yeah, I don't know,"
Well, that's a theme that has come up a few times is in some of your songs is like a French kind of theme. And then the name of your publishing company.
Right.
Yeah. Tell us about that. What is that?
Well, my family was from Alsace-Lorraine, or part of them was. So I just used it, as a thing. It's another romantic myth that I created.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm a romanticist at heart, I guess. A lover of lost causes.
Well, it was last night. I was listening to, it's the song, I think it's the last song on Scotch. Gosh. Is it Put On Your Love?
Yeah. Dress Up.
Oh, Put Your Love On.
Put Your Love On, yeah. So you're a romantic.
Well, not in the, in the classical romantic sense.
Right.
Well,
In the era, I mean.
Philosophically. I would gravitate towards that over I guess, I don't know. Maybe not. I had CNBC on when you came in, so I guess that's pretty classical.
When you think about your career, the songs you've written, the things that you've done, the tours you've done, what are you the most proud of?
Probably this album.
Yeah? What is it about this album that makes you especially proud of it?
I don't know. It's just it's came together really well. The music is awesome. Everybody's playing is awesome. The sound is great. There's no compromising. There's no, it's like, this is what I want it to be,
What do you want to do musically that you haven't yet? Or is there anything?
Oh, yeah. I would really like to do more of this.
More jazz?
Yeah, and maybe a little bit more, maybe not so orchestral the next one, maybe, having said that, writing pop songs is fun too, it's just, I'm kind of not in that mode at the moment, but...
If I can interject, one of the things I think is that's amazing about what Raj does is that these two songs, whether it's Cowboy Ballet or Frenchmen for the Night or Tin Roof, exist in the same writer's palette, which is unusual because it takes quite. None of us are the best at what's possible. That's never going to happen. But to write a song like Tin Roof, you need kind of a deep toolbox in some ways. And then it's very different for Frenchmen for the Night. You need but it's a very different toolbox. And to have all those in one writer is unusual. I think that's a special thing. And I'm going to venture to say that one of the reasons, Raj, we may have enjoyed so much this process of Tin Roof is that we got to dig deep into what we were about. This is our whole history right here. Mm-hmm. What we grew up playing is jazz. But there's simple melodies like Still Life. There's some stories behind the songs, that kind of thing.
Well, one of the stories, I don't know if I could pronounce the name of the song right. It's either Huey or probably Huffy. How do you say the name of that? What is it?
Hoogie.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
The song?
Yeah, tell us about that song.
It's just like a little, kind of pseudo Ornette Coleman-ish kind of little country riff, thing. That's for the vehicles, more for the musicians to play on, Because I didn't really, I had the kind of more, very composed things where it was like, okay, this, it's in, and then I wanted a song that was more like in the jazz terms called a blowing song, but it's not really a blowing song. It's just something simpler that would be a nice complement to the other songs, Like, to me, I was looking at it like if I were a listener, this is what I would want to hear now. Like, I've heard this song, I've heard this Lush song, I've heard this ballad. Now I want to hear this kind of more, a little playing thing, you know what I mean? That's how I wanted the album to be, like a listening. You should, you should listen to it, not just like,
Yeah, listen to it as a whole.
Right. Like, that's what you want, ideally, because you want them all to work together. Like, oh, that's cool, Because to me, that's the thing I don't like about some instrumental jazz stuff is it all starts to sound the same. Like, they don't, which is one of the things I love about what Pat always does is that it's always from a listener's place. Like, he'll play a Lush song, and then he'll play a song that's very bare bones or whatever. The textures change, and it's much more interesting from a listening point of view. Even for someone who's a musician, it still gets boring if it's all you ever hear is the same thing. And lots of musicians tend to do that. They're stuck in their list. They're playing from their point of view, and it's like, well, that's fun for you, but it's not really. It's not the listener may be like, well, that's kind of boring, or I don't understand, and those are okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, maybe the other people are like, well, it's not here for you to understand. It's just here for me to play. That's all what you want. But I wanted it to be like that, so that's really the reason for the tune. In fact, I kept bugging Pete to finish it, and he wouldn't, so we just left it as it was. I said, I'm sure you can bring something to this.
Yeah, I got fired from that song. I think we're a lot less tolerant now, though, of that. When we grew up, we climbed into the artist space. And I'm not trying to tout us as some great, but the big thing was like, whoa, listen to this player. And we had great patience for listening to a 17-minute song that was just really hard to get, sometimes I wished for more patience. But now people want to be gratified real quick, but I'm really glad Raj put that song on the album. It's not only a great little song, but it shows another side of your playing too, with the drumming and stuff.
Do you think it will be as many years until there's another Roger Guth album? There was a long break.
Yeah. I hope not. I gotta find I need a thunder for the next one.
But this project has kind of reinvigorated.
Yeah, I would love to do another one of these, depending on how I feel about this one. Or maybe I'll, the singing thing, I don't know, I'm kind of, that was more just kind of a fun thing to do. I mean, I don't like my voice, so it's very hard for me to do it.
What makes you happiest?
Well, no, that's a tough question. Yeah, I don't know. Everything. I'm not really like one thing or the other. Reading is good.
Yeah? What kind of stuff do you read?
Do I read?
What kind of stuff, yeah?
I'm a pretty avid reader, literature, I'm a big fan of Jim Harrison's. All those Western, like Tom McGuane, Jim Harrison, those guys. But I've read a lot of, Faulkner and Hemingway and all that stuff.
Has there been a book that you've read that has been the biggest, like the most interesting book, the most inspiring book?
Well, I have to say, when I read World According to Garp was an amazing book to me. I think it was where I was at in my life, and that was a great book to me. John Irving is such a great writer.
What are you reading now?
Actually, I'm reading Jim Harrison.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The Ancient Mistral.
This is kind of an open-ended question. For anyone who's listening to this, wherever they are, or if they're reading it, however they experience it, what would you want to say to them?
I'm not sure what you mean. Like, what would I want to say to them?
Yeah, you have pretty much, you have the stage. You can say whatever you want.
I don't know. Be kind to one another and, try to do the right thing.
My last question is another one of my strange questions. Who is Roger Guth?
That is a strange question.
I have many.
I'm not sure what you mean by that. I mean, what do you want?
How do you define yourself?
Oh, I don't like defining myself too much. I'd rather just sort of let it happen. I don't like to go fishing, but that, I wouldn't, define my life with that. I like to play music, but again, I wouldn't,
So if there was if you had a test and they said, "Who is Roger Guth?" what would you write?
I don't know.
Well, Roger, I have to say, it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this, Paul. It's been a pleasure doing it.
I've been very persistent. Thank you very much for putting up with it.
You're welcome.